generator where you just do Ember generate new route, new controller, whatever, and it just creates a for you. So that's similar. But the point is that you can do all these things in every other language, or sorry, every other framework. But the point is that you just don't have to figure that out. So you don't have to spend any time doing that research, right? Like I've had to do all this research on my own with React and Webpack. With this, it's just all there. And the conventions and settings and configurations are good. They're very powerful. They're very good. They're community based. So there's issues with Ember that I'll talk about that maybe React and Angular do better. But as far as like just getting up and running, you can get a project up and running in 20 minutes. I mean, just running the app, you can do it in 20 minutes, 10 minutes, right? So Ember, like I mentioned before, Ember is convention-based. Community conventions. This isn't only for like the development environment. This is also for the framework itself. So how many of you are Rails people? That's it? Rails people? So if you're familiar with, so what else is the rest, like what else do you guys do? How many of you guys do backend stuff? What do you guys mostly use?
C# Web API.
Python.
Web API.
C#?
C#.
What else?
Java.
Python.
Java. Oh, okay. So, sorry? Oh, okay. So, if you're familiar, if you ever, like you guys that know Rails and that use Rails, like this is like, right? This is like
Bread and butter.
bread and butter, right? Let me kind of go off on that tangent a little bit, so you guys understand where a lot of this comes from. I think it was Rails that introduced a concept, or at least the first one that made popular the concept of conventional configuration. So like in .NET, but specifically in Java, for those of you guys that know Java and have worked with Spring, like I've had to suffer through Spring like I have, you spend so much time, for example, like configuring XML files in Spring. Not anymore. But this is, this Rails is going back 10 years ago. So, we're talking about 2005, 2006.
Yeah.
So all these super enterprising software at the time, you had to spend all this time just configuring the framework itself, not even anything outside of it. So Ruby on Rails was a framework that was revolutionary at the time because, like Ember, and Ember got all this ideas from Rails, it gave you like a pre-built one like holistic package. And then it made a lot of decisions for you through conventions. So instead of configuring the framework, you subscribe to its conventions, and you got velocity that way. And so Ember inherited all those things. And when I say that Ember is convention-based, it means convention-based, like in the same sort of vein as Ruby and Rails. So in Angular, for example, and Angular 2 might be different, but in Angular, for example, when you set up, I guess, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't messed with Angular too much, but when you set up your route, you have to tell it, point to this controller, point to this, then controller points to these directives, and then like hook in the model, you do that explicitly, right? And you have like an HTML tag or something that you do that explicitly. With Ember, that's all like figured out for you. So when you generate a new route, for example, you get your template that's bound to it automatically, and then whatever models and controllers and things you have, like it's all just pre-wired up for you. So it's a kind of like, it's a different philosophy. For a lot of Rails guys, like Ember makes a lot of choice because they're used to that sort of convention-based thing. For like other people, like especially Java people and .NET people, it's a little bit of a whole different philosophy. You kind of have to like ride that learning curve. I know I did because I am in traditional my career was based in .NET. When I first got introduced to Ruby on Rails and Ember, I had to like struggle with giving up a lot of that power to the framework. So we talked about this. Ember just provides an integrated application framework plus a build development environment. That's all done for you. All right, so let's just go over the major Ember sort of concepts. Ember started out being an MVC framework. It's not so much MVC anymore because the use of controllers is being deprecated. and the concepts of web components are really kind of taking over what controllers would do at the time. Start about Ember CLI, and I actually can show you how that works. The Ember CLI is just like an NPM package that you install, and then you do everything, like that's essentially your development environment. That's how you start the server runtime to run your app. That's how you run your tests, that's how you generate artifacts. If you have, there's also the concept of Ember add-ons. So if there's like a particular, for example, like to deploy your app, there's an add-on for that. So if you install the add-on to do Ember deploy, you get a new command in the CLI, and then you say like Ember deploy environment equals production, and then it pushes it up to whatever your target environment is. Let me just show you guys that real quick. So if I do Ember, it should just give me a little bit. It's just like the resolution is terrible.
It's just change your mirroring so that it uses the projector's resolution.
You want to help me with that?
So on the up on the top right,
Yeah.
the little display.
Yeah.
What does it say there?
Mirror, built-in retina display, mirror, Extron A.
Extron A.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. Oh, okay, perfect. That's what it was checked.
Command 0 to get back to your original set.
Yeah. So, it's gonna be. So let's do that again. So if you just run the Ember command, you get all the different options on the CLI. So let me see if I can kind of go through some of the, like 99% of these you don't use much. This is just the documentation, so it gives you everything. The most common one I use all the time is just Ember S or Ember Server. That'll run your app. And so ignore the warnings. And so once that's up, that means that your app is up and running. So if I come in and go to localhost 4200, my app is running. Right? Just to show you something else, like if you do Ember G route UX+DEV summit, it'll generate the route for you. And now if we go to the app, like if we go to the code, sorry, we'll see that we have a new route called UX+DEV summit and a new template for UX+DEV summit. So like this is how easy this is, right? So like here I say, header 1, hello, UX+DEV summit 2016, post my tag, right? Oops. Let's run the app again. And by the way, you don't have to stop the app to generate things. Like you can just generate it in another window or tmux or whatever. And so if we go to a UX+DEV summit, right? And we get our template. So it's a really fast development once you get to know the tool. Like you get a lot of velocity right away. And that just all comes from the power of the tool being so integrated and doing so much and providing so much for you. I guess I did show you a little bit. So router, if you kind of just go back to the sample I wrote, the sample I just made, I did generate a route. That created an entry in my router file that essentially defines the URL and parameters that the URL passes in. Sorry? I'm going to explain to you, I'm going to talk about controllers. If you remember what I mentioned a little while back, they're being deprecated and to components. So here my app just has only has a few routes, right? It has an about route, has a contact, index and edit to edit and view contacts, and then this is the new one we just added. So we did like a get diff, like you can just see that every line is the same except for that. So that was done for me. I didn't do anything. Now, if you want to like say, well, this UX+DEV summit route takes in a parameter for like an ID for the section or the class or whatever, you have to obviously put that in yourself. But it's typically very simple. And you can, if you notice something, that how these are like nested routes, that means that I have a resource, right? Like almost like a REST API resource called contact. And then underneath that I have edit and indexes no resource. So that you get like a nice stateful URL. And it does all that for you. Let's see that, let's demonstrate that. So if I click on one of my contacts, right, it's just contact/form. So if you're writing, let's say, an enterprise app, and like you guys rely a lot on shortcuts, you can literally just give that shortcut to someone else, and it'll set the state for you of this view here. So if you really want to go out, you can make your entire app and your URL be completely stateful. And then if I hit edit, it'll go to contact edit form. And same thing, I could share this. So that was one of the main points. I haven't done like single page apps with React yet, and I know there's like a React outer component. I'm assuming it works the same way, but here it's really nice. Huh?
So this is running for server side?
For?
Server side?
No, this is all client side. Yeah, it's all client side, yeah. Yeah, it's all client side. So this is the router file. Just wanted to show you guys that. There's also routes. So route is an actual class. So he was asking about controllers. MVC is a little different. What your controller typically does in like a regular MVC app is shared between the routes, what's left of the controller class, and then components. So this is like an actual class, and I can show you that as well. That fetches and serves data. So this is like where you put like your hook to get your data from your API. And then it's a place to store like additional view logic. So like a lot of the stuff you put on controller, you put here. Let me just go through these and then I can show you like some of the code. Then you have models. These models are models. They just mutate the state of the app. Something that I just discovered with React that has completely changed how I think about this is Redux, like with Flux. Like I don't know how. Like to me that's such a superior sort of model for mutating and keeping state of the app. I'm not so sure whether I like your traditional MVC model strategy anymore. But at least in Ember, it's very nice. You can essentially create like you've got Java guys and .NET guys, and if you know domain-driven design, you can essentially create like a full-blown domain-driven design object graph, model graph in Ember. And so it specifies, like, for example, you can create a model for your user, right? First name, last name, and then have logic inside of there, just like a domain object. And then you can have hooks to retain data and all that. And it's all fully observable, dual bound and all that. And then controllers used to search and try to get rid of controllers altogether. One of the reasons is, like, if you kind of embark on learning Ember, one of the biggest pain points, and at least for me it was when I first started, is it's very ambiguous as to what you would put on the route versus the controller. It would just didn't make sense. You kind of just had to keep going to kind of for those sort of paradigms to sink in. So to reduce that ambiguity, they're going to get rid of controllers altogether. And again, it was like just a place to put additional view logic and whatnot. Let me show you those, and we'll go back to web components. So let me see what models I have. So like this is just a simple model, right? It's a contact model. It just has first name, last name, and phone number. This is actually fully relational. So you have like has many and many to many that you can model. So you can essentially, like I said before, create like an actual domain model. And then as you mutate these states, like a meta attribute of every model is like has change, is dirty, all of that, kind of like if you're used to an ORM. And then when you say submit or when you hit save, it actually goes out and sends the right AJAX calls to your API. So you almost never have to do like $AJAX for anything. The Ember framework takes care of that for you.
What does the S stand for?
Extend is like what you showed on your ES6 class.
No, DS, which you're importing from Ember data.
Oh yeah, ES is it's the Ember data object. I don't know what they call it ES. It's just what they call it.
I think it's data store.
Data store. Yeah. Yeah, that's ES6. Oh, yeah, that's a good point. When we were listening to the ES6 talk earlier, I know a lot of people in that session, at least, were not using ES6, or we're not moving to ES6 too much at the moment. People that have been developing with Ember have been using ES6 since, like, I think 2013. All those standards were, for the most part, like nailed down even back then, and it already came with the Babel transpiler built in that Zara showed you, and so we get that out of the box. Get that out of the box.
Right. You can call it DS or, you know.
Yeah, you call DS anything else, yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's just convention. That's just convention. So web components, let me just come in here real quick. So just like React, this is a big deal in Ember. These guys completely ripped, like they had the idea of web components from before, but since React came out and became so ubiquitous, like they completely ripped off the idea of web components from React. So same thing as React, like not as pure as React, because React component really is just a function. In here, it's similar in that you have at least the premise of like data down and actions up. So as the state of your, as the dependent state of your component changes, the component re-renders. And it also has the virtual domino that React does. They completely stole that from React. I don't know if I have any of this stuff. I must have. Oh yeah, so my form is a component, right? So this would be like the logic definition for my component. This is the form. So the form only has like one thing, and it's just how to save, right? So here we're using a promise, and then we're saying get the contact from the form. So whatever contact you put in, first, last, and phone number, save, and then if the save is successful, meaning that your API returned 200 or some other successful code, you're going to send an action back up, right? So again, like no $Ajax, no manual talking to your API. Although you could, but for the most part you don't. It's all taken care of for you. And every component obviously has, or not every, but the ones that have complex markup come, coupled with a template. So if we look at contact form, you have an HDS file, and so this is the form that you guys saw earlier. This is the markup representation. So this is the save button at the top. You see the save as the action. That's what calls the save that you saw earlier. Go ahead. Yes. Yeah, there is a concept of services. I wasn't going to get into that, but there is. Let me get to that at the end. I'll talk about like other things that I don't have on the slides. There's also DI, like in that's like kind of coupled up with services. So the contact list would be my other. So if we look at the app, the component that I'm showing you is this right here, and then this would be another component, the actual list of contacts. So let's just take a look at that real quick. This is the. Let me show you the markup first. Let me just kind of go backwards. So this markup here renders that whole list, right? So we have the input at the top to do the filtering, and the filter is actually functioning. We have the button for like adding a new user contact, which I haven't implemented that together. That's something we could do tomorrow on the workshop if you guys are inclined to come. And then we have for each filter contact, go ahead and draw or render that individual item. So this one has a lot more sort of back-end logic, right? So the filter contact is built through a bound property. And so all we're doing there is saying essentially with a high order function JavaScript filter out records that don't match what you put in the input box. So the first line, that's what it does, is just sort of, so the first line is basically input box value, I call the search contact that name. And then sorted contacts get kind of using like a sort of inherent sort of way of sorting Ember. You get your contacts already sorted, and then you just filter them out based on what's on the input box. So you can really, just like React, you can really sort of compose your application of very small components for the most part. You have your logic just segregated to those components. So. Anybody have any like Angular, React guys, like anything that like sort of pops up at you? You got some? Oh.
I have,
Yeah.
so whatever that you, it's all there in Angular as well, like Angular bar and Angular 2. So what's the difference in Angular? Okay, everything was whatever you said, it's all there in Angular.
Yeah, of course.
So what is the, so it should go for Angular and Angular.
So absolutely, I mean, Ember, React, and Angular, and I'm sure there's a ton of other ones out there, are all feature parity. None of the stuff that I'm showing you, it's impossible to do in Angular or vice versa. I mean, my main point of this talk is to kind of give you guys that third option of if you, let's say you're working starting a new project at a company, and maybe you're not so familiar with Angular or React, or maybe you want to just do something different, and you don't want to spend like me, like I'm still, I'm in one thing my project, I'm about to finish configuring React. You don't want to go through all that trouble. You have like a choice where everything is provided for you, right? That I would say is the plus. Like, I mean, the plus is a great framework. I mean, it's like as you see, you get ES6 out of the box. You get a full, you get an ORM to get APIs with. You get like the whole thing is built on premises with like high-order functions. You can either kind of, the one cool thing about Ember is that if you were really into like functional programming, you can build your entire app that way also. If you're not so familiar with that yet, you can kind of fall back to like more object-oriented ways of building your app. I mean, the architecture of the app is also incredible. It's really nice. There's also very little boilerplate. So again, I don't know about Angular 2, but like I know with previous versions of Angular, you had all this boilerplate to wire up your controllers to views and all this stuff. Like and then you had to just copy and paste that boilerplate over and over. As you see, there's literally no boilerplate here. I mean, if I show you the route class for contacts, so if I show you like the main route class, right? So this is the application root. The root route for my application, like that's it, right? So just from the main application JS alone and the application, that HBS template file, it hooks it up for you automatically. You can override that, but you don't 99% of the time.
So everything is hooked up by default?
It's by convention, yeah, by convention. So, so that's what I would say would be the biggest gain. You just get so much out of the box, and then once you, obviously like anything else, once you get to know the framework, like your velocity is incredible. Another thing that like the Rails guys might know is that the open source community behind Ember is incredible. I mean, like you can go out there and follow these guys on Twitter and ask them questions. There's like a global Ember meetup that happens like every 2 weeks. I mean, it's just the community is like second to none. And that's something that attracts a lot of people. You know, and my kind of personal bias is this is like a true open source framework. Arguably, Angular and React are not. I mean, this is truly open source. There's no single corporation sponsoring this. Like tons of corporations contribute money and time through their employees to develop Ember. But there isn't a single point of sort of gatekeeping like Microsoft, Google, and Facebook. So for a lot of engineers out there, that's also kind of a thing they like.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's Angular.
Why?
Because it's like, for example, Angular, you know that it's a big company behind Angular.
Yeah, but at the same time, how much is Google using it? How much is Google using Angular?
But it's the same here. You don't know if someday something's going to happen.
You're still making it bad no matter what.
Yeah, you know, the plus, look what Google just did with Angular 2. I mean, they rewrote the framework. It's completely not backwards compatible. With Ember, they do a release, I think every 6 weeks, 4 weeks, and then they deprecate, as they deprecate things, they give you warnings. So as long as you spend maybe a few hours a week, you'll always be on the latest and greatest. So there will never be like an Angular 2 craziness out. And I mean, I know Angular. I don't particularly like Angular. To me, it just looks way too dirty. I do love React though. I'm falling in love with React.
Unless you're like on the board of directors of Google or Facebook, it's a gamble no matter what.
It's a gamble.
It's a gamble no matter what.
Yeah. And so, kind of more like Rails, this is a true open source framework. You can submit PRs to this, and there's not some like person at Google making decisions as to whether your PR comes in or not. I mean, it's like more really community based. And so, I mean, you don't know if at some point Angular 2 will go through the same thing as Angular 1, or if Google at some point will stop making Angular. I don't know, I might be wrong. My understanding is that Google doesn't really use Angular inside that much. So, I mean, I think at least with React, Facebook does. So I mean, what test is that? They're not even dog fooding it. You know? So, where are we? So templates, let's talk about templates real quick. Just show you the markup. There's a ton of like helpers within a template so that you can, obviously tokenize your template, put values in, to do errors with loops and all kinds of other things. That's pretty standard. The only thing I want to mention about templates is that, like I mentioned before, is they did copy the React Shadow DOM thing. We already kind of talked about this Ember data. I'm trying to think. One thing that they just did with Ember data, which I don't like, is that these guys at like the Ember community or Ember core members, they came up with something called JSON API, which is like a new sort of protocol, like JSON protocol. And I think it's like really bloated and really complicated. I mean, which is kind of ironic because their whole point was like saying this will simplify things, but to me it's like super bloated. You don't have to use that, but it's kind of the way they're going. And just like typical life cycle, if you're writing your app, is you kind of use you just use the CLI for everything. You typically, as you create new routes, you create the routes, kind of what I showed you, and then componentize the routes, and also for reusability. You run the data, and you handle the actions, and you take the data, and then that's kind of like a loop, right? So you're always creating new routes, and you're monitoring components all the time. And that's kind of like your MO, right? Like that's how you develop application in Ember. All right, so services, like he asked about services. Just like again, like back to what you Java folks, like within during design, you have the concept of a service class that's injectable. So if you're looking to do a specific piece of logic that doesn't really fit into a component or a route, but it is reusable, you declare a service. That service class automatically gets registered with a dependency injection container, and then you can inject that class wherever. So like I don't know, like if I come up, like maybe a service class that does localization, right? And it looks up like, I don't know, like maybe whatever you do with localization, how you look up a list of tokens to then plop into your site to change the language. That's something that arguably could be used anywhere. If you're looking at same data for multiple components, yes, yeah. But with Ember, you don't typically do it like that because in Ember, all your data is like stored throughout all your routes. So, but yeah, but absolutely, yeah. Especially if you're kind of going outside the bounds of Ember data. Like let's say Ember data, it's too difficult to do what you want to do. Like for example, one thing that Ember data doesn't do well at all is like bulk stuff. Like they want you to do one thing at a time. So like if I change one of my contacts, let's say I change a bunch of them and I hit save, like it's gonna come out and make like 10 calls, right? Like that's kind of shitty, you know. But so if you want to do that in bulk, and then you want to create a service class for that, and then it gets, like I said, it gets registered with the container, so you just pull it from wherever. What else can I talk about? Along the same lines of services, there's also like helpers. So if you have like little utilities you need, you have those. And then the other thing is that, let me show you, Ember add-ons. So like, there's add-ons galore. Anything you possibly could imagine, they have an add-on for. So you have that option. This guy right here, Sam Selikov, he works at TED, and he wrote something called Ember CLI Mirage. And let me show you that. It's actually really cool. So if you look at my app, like my app is fully functioning, right? So I can click on any of these. I can filter, and I can edit, and my edits persist, right? But if we open up the network inspector, nothing's happening, right? Even though this is fully wired up through Ember data to talk to an API, nothing's happening. Because I didn't take the time to write a real API, this add-on called Ember CLI Mirage intercepts the actual network calls and then provides like a in-memory backend for it. So to install that, you just say like Ember install Ember Mirage, whatever. And then let me show you how that works. So it creates a new folder here somewhere called Mirage, right? And then here in Mirage, you have like factories and scenarios. And so, for example, like one thing where your factory would be to say, this is a factory to create fake users or fake contacts. And it's using Faker. You guys use Faker? No one's here? Faker? I'll show you that later. I'll show you that later. It's like an amazing, huh?
Ruby, there's a Faker.
Right, so Faker is a library, and I'll show you the GitHub repo later. It's a library where you can create fake data for almost anything. So in this case, it's creating fake data for my first, last name, and phone number. That's why when I refresh the page here on my app, right, it's randomly generating username and passwords. Sorry, excuse me, username, first names, last names, and phone numbers. Right? And that's all being done through Faker. And then in the same sort of vein, I have an in-memory server that will handle saving contacts and pulling contacts. So this is actually the file. So here I'm saying when there's a call to the contacts resource, like in my API resource, then pull this data, right? And then it goes back and figures out the factory and does the Faker thing. And same thing, like you can do a get by ID in this case, and then you can do a patch, which is like a put to edit the data. So in other words, like if you work in a large enough company, or if you want to just like get the app running and working and to showcase it and then worry about the API later, you can. You can fully construct your app without any backend whatsoever. And then you just turn off Ember CLI, stand up your API, and then like you're good to go. It's all plug and play. Oh, you're doing it? I'm actually doing that with React. The app that I'm working on React right now, I'm doing the same thing. I don't have like an Ember CLI, a Mirage plugin as far as I know. But I'm doing the same thing. I'm building the whole app in memory first with like no backend. And then after the app, like after the user acceptance happens or whatever happens, I'll go back and plug in the API. So I think that's pretty much all I wanted to share with you guys. I'm doing a workshop tomorrow where we can do whatever you guys want. The workshop's at 9 o'clock. And we can either build the contacts app or whatever else you guys want, or you guys want to maybe just like build maybe something you're working, we want to play around with, and I can help you build it. But if you guys want, please attend, and then we'll just build some cool stuff. That's it. That's all I have. Anything else?
Yeah. However, we will would behave with changing some tool that provide, for example, the task runner. I know that Ember runs with roughly, but what if you want to use like run or go?
I wouldn't even mess with that. I would just use what the Ember CLI gives you. I mean, it just gives you, unless you're really trying to do something really strange, I wouldn't recommend just kind of like integrating your own tools into it. You just don't need it.
That's not one of the things that you can swap out.
I mean, I'm sure you can, right? I mean, I'm sure you can go in there and swap it out, but like, why? You know, like, what are you trying to do with Gulp that this doesn't already have?
I don't know, maybe Berkeley is like, I don't know, kind of fringe, and the community is not that wide like Grunt or Gulp.
Yeah.
And actually like Gulp has like a pipe for the task.
Yeah.
It's more like intuitive than Berkeley.
Right. So my question to you is, what do you, like, if you can come up with an example of something you're trying to do that this doesn't already do, then you have a problem. Like, what are you trying to do with Gulp? Like, minimize your files, like, plug a bobble in, like, you already have that. So I worked with Ember probably for a good year and a half. I mean, almost exclusively. I never once had to mess with the build. Never.
Yeah, but what if you're like studying with Ember and you have to learn also Berkeley?
You don't. It's all the Ember CLI. You don't have, frankly, I didn't even know that was what it was based on.
Okay.
I had no idea, frankly. It's just all with the CLI. You never had to like learn something. At least I never had to do it. Like now with React, I do. I'm like messing around with Webpack and everything. So I know what you're saying. The same thing with like when I stood up a small Angular project, like I had to mess with Gulp all the time. But we just don't. It's like all just done
Okay.
for you.
And what if like, I mean, if you want, you don't want to use like QUnit for unit testing,
Yeah.
that would be a problem, right? Because
Yeah.
people like to use like Mocha or
Yeah.
Simon.
I think that you can swap. That you can swap. Well, that's the thing, man, right? Like when you have, and you bring up a great point. Like when you have a framework where all the tools and things are figured out for you, if you don't like one of those things, you're gonna suffer, right? Just like if you don't agree with the conventions, you're gonna suffer. Like that's the price you pay. But same thing with Ruby, with Rails, same exact thing. If you don't like, I don't know, whatever, some Rails component, like RSpec, yeah, like I'm sure you can swap it out, but it's probably not that easy, right?
I think it's
pretty easy.
when you are building the project.
What to use, yeah. I'm pretty sure like QUnit for this you can't swap out. Because that is something that is a big complaint.
The problem that there's certain things, like the framework has to allow you to swap it out, for you to
Yeah.
swap it out. So if there's one little thing that you want to swap out and they haven't made it possible
Right.
yet, then that's when you're screwed. But like normal things like the test framework, I'm just speaking here about
Yeah.
here's the Rails. Like, the Rails, like the test framework, the models, you know, the
Right.
models.
Yeah,
so
active
you can-
record, whatever.
Yeah, you can swap that out.
Yeah. The other thing is that with Ember, a lot of things are components. So like for example, Ember Data is like an Ember add-on. If you don't like Ember Data, I'm sure there's another add-on that you can easily install and swap out Ember Data. Might be the same with the test. Frankly, it's like they're more and more they're getting super componentized. Just like kind of like Babel, like what was the latest version of Babel where they made everything a component and a switch and then like screwed so many people up? It's like the same thing.
So
So
there's enough opinionated people about test frameworks that they're definitely gonna make that,
Yeah.
let you stop that.
Yeah, and like the testing is interesting because like Tom Dale will go like if you like tweet Tom Dale, like people have tweeted to Tom Dale, who's one of the creators, and they're like, why do you choose QUnit? Like people like Jasmine and other things better. He'll go like out of his way to like defend QUnit, which I think is ridiculous. I don't like QUnit either that much, but I'm pretty sure that is something you can swap out.
And the server is like focused in BDD or DD or something for testing.
I think it's BD. Yes, I think it's BD. And by the way, you do get a full-blown like testing framework out of the box. Like if you notice here, if I do like, I know we're running out of time, but let me just show, like if I run the generator and I say Ember G component Leo, right? You get a test. Oh, sorry, component names have to have a dash in it. Leo component. If I show you that Leo component, right, so like I created my component class, an empty class, and I created my template, it also created a test file. So right away, like if you want to go nuts testing, like there it is. You're done. I mean, like with React, that's like something I still have to figure out. So if any of you guys want to help me, like plug in a test runner with React, please come see me after. But here it's all done for you. I mean, it's pretty amazing. So, yeah. All right, anything else? Good. All right, well, I hope to see